Hello Star Wars fans, and welcome to another ranking video. Today we're going to be ranking all 20 books from the Jedi Apprentice series by Dave Wolverton and Jude Watson. I really enjoyed this entire series, so this was a really difficult list to make. Anyways, without further ado, let's rank and review. Unfortunately, in last place we have Book 18, the final book of the main series called The Threat Within. This one was just so underwhelming, not just as a finale, but as a Star Wars book. This is one of the few adventures in this series that completely lacked stakes. The book is about a series of sabotages on the work-oriented planet of Vorzid 4, and other than a few injuries, the book lacked all stakes. And worst of all, it barely even attempted to wrap up the plot lines and character arcs of the entire series. A few throwaway lines here and there about how far Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon have come, but other than that, this was just a one-off adventure that should have happened way earlier in the series. Here's another book where very little happened. Book 10 of the series, titled The Shattered Peace, is about the planet of Rutan and its moon Senali, who trade their royal heirs to promote peace. The book's premise is that one of the heirs refuses to go home, and rumors spread that he's being held for ransom. Anyways, the book teases war between the two planets, but nothing ever actually happens. What puts this book above The Threat Within is that A, it's not the finale of the series, B, the setting was a bit more interesting, as I actually really enjoyed the scenes on Senali, and C, I actually thought all of the setup for these two planets was pretty interesting. Next is Book 4, titled The Mark of the Crown, and we have another pretty forgettable one-off adventure. This one takes place on the planet of Gala, and is a pretty cliche story about a transition of power with some political intrigue thrown in the mix. Overall, this one was just really formulaic and just didn't progress the plot or character development enough to rank any higher. Then we have another really underwhelming and disappointing finale. This time it's Book 8, The Day of Reckoning, which serves as the finale to the Xanatos arc, and this one just fell very flat for me. Overall, the book is fine, but the way it wraps up the arc felt very rushed, especially with Xanatos' death feeling so sudden and random. And it's unfortunate because Xanatos was such an interesting character, so I wish his death would have been more rewarding. And then we've got Book 3, The Hidden Past, and this one takes place on the planet Findar, a planet ruled by an organization called the Syndicate, who have been brainwashing and erasing the memories of anyone who they deem a threat. Ironically, the book about memory erasure is also one of the most forgettable ones. Again, this one is just another one-off adventure that doesn't really progress the larger plot or develop the characters in any significant way. Now we've got Book 13, titled The Dangerous Rescue, and this one serves as the conclusion to the Genazan Arbor trilogy, and honestly, I just found this one a bit forgettable. The whole trilogy kind of blends together, and this one felt like a pretty rushed finale to the whole arc. The pacing of this one just felt off, with the titular Dangerous Rescue of Qui-Gon getting wrapped up right at the beginning, and the rest of the book being just more investigations of Jenna until eventually the arc just kind of ends. Genazan Arbor is locked up, everyone is saved, and that's that. I also thought the inclusion of Adigalia and Siritachi was a bit of a waste, with there being very little development of their characters and their dynamic with Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan. Next, we've got Book 9, titled The Fight for Truth, and this is where the list transitions from being the forgettable books to the pretty fun ones. And unlike Book 13, this book includes Adigalia and Siritachi and actually gives them some development. It's also just a pretty fun adventure about espionage and brainwashing. And finally, it's also got one of my favorite scenes in the whole series, where Qui-Gon gets a vision of old Obi-Wan on Tatooine, a scene that gave me goosebumps when I read it. Next, we have Book 12, The Evil Experiment, and this one is the second book in the Genazan Arbor trilogy, and yet again, we've got a pretty forgettable book that blends together with Book 13. Overall, it's more of the same. We learn a few more tidbits of information about our villains, a few more questions are raised, and nothing is resolved just quite yet. I did, however, really enjoy the end of this book, where Obi-Wan goes to rescue Qui-Gon, but then Jenna threatens to kill her other Jedi prisoner if they leave, and Obi-Wan is forced to leave without Qui-Gon. I thought that was a really cool way to end the book, and it showcased the level of trust between the two very well. Then we have Book 17, titled The Only Witness, and this one served as a really nice breath of fresh air after a few really intense multi-book arcs. Unlike some of the books at the bottom of this list, this book managed to feel very refreshing and self-contained without feeling uninteresting and inconsequential. This one was all about Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan protecting a witness from a crime family that's after her, which is just a classic Jedi adventure from this era. Overall, although this was similar to a lot of books on this list that I ranked much lower, its placement in the series absolutely changed my perception of it. Now we've got the true finale to the Jedi Apprentice series, the second special edition titled The Followers. And this one's got a very interesting story about followers of the Sith trying to find a very powerful Sith holocron. And I really enjoyed the way this book portrayed the Sith as a mysterious, almost mythical threat of the past. Of course, with this being a special edition, it's split into two stories, one with Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan, and the other with Obi-Wan and Anakin. Unfortunately, unlike the other special edition, which I'll talk about later, this one didn't have too much character development to make it feel important in the long run. Next, we have Book 16, The Call to Vengeance, which serves as the finale to the New Absalom storyline. And this one, although my least favorite of the trilogy, was still a very fun read. This one features a very broken and vengeful Qui-Gon after the death of Tal, and that was really interesting to see. Another thing I really liked, and I talked about this in my review of the book, was the reveal that the second sister, Iritha, was working with the villains. It really felt like everyone was working against the Jedi. Switching gears, we now have the first book in the New Absalom trilogy, Book 14, The Ties That Bind, and this one had a lot of great character work for Qui-Gon and Tal that really made you care about their relationship going forward. It also had some surprisingly dark moments, like when the Governor Rowan was killed in a very gruesome manner. However, what held this book back from a higher spot on the list for me was that the book's setup was extremely similar to others in the series, and it made a large portion of this book feel pretty formulaic and derivative. But other than that, this was a really good start to the trilogy. And now we have the first special edition titled Deceptions, and this one expands on a hanging plot thread from the main series, which is the death of Bruk Chun. In this book, Bruk's family comes to Coruscant to investigate the circumstances of his death and end up trying to indict Obi-Wan for his murder. Then we have a time jump, and like the other special edition, the second half of this book is an adventure with Obi-Wan and Anakin. And I thought, although the plot in this one was weaker than the other special edition, this one had much stronger character work, especially with its exploration of Obi-Wan's guilt over Bruk's death. I also enjoyed how Bruk's brother was able to forgive Obi-Wan near the end of the book. Alright, now we have Book 7, titled The Captive Temple, and this one is part of the Xanatos storyline and involves Xanatos and Bruk Chun infiltrating and sabotaging the Jedi Temple. And I really enjoyed this book when I read it. Unlike the book that follows it, this book actually feels like a climactic finale to the arc, despite that it doesn't actually wrap the story up. I really enjoyed the duel between Bruk and Obi-Wan, and I enjoyed the exploration of the Jedi Temple's innards. My only complaint is that I wish this book was a bit more intense, akin to when the Jedi Temple was infiltrated by Cad Bane in the Clone Wars TV series. Next, we've got the first book of the Genazan Arbor trilogy, Book 11, titled The Deadly Hunter. And this one was by far my favorite of that trilogy. I really enjoyed this book's simplicity. Even among the rest of the series, which are all books geared towards children, this book's plot was extremely simple, as it only really consisted of the Jedi protecting a few friends from a bounty hunter. We were only introduced to Genazan Arbor as a minor side character, and we didn't even know who the hunter was. It was just a really fun cat-and-mouse chase throughout the galaxy, and I really enjoyed it. Then we have Book 15, the middle book of the New Absalom trilogy, titled The Death of Hope. And this one overall was pretty average throughout. It just consisted of Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan following Tal's trail through the desert for quite a while, but the reason this book is so high on the list is because of, spoiler alert, Tal's death. This book built up to Tal's death really well, with a lot of flashbacks to her in Qui-Gon's youth, and her death ended up hitting very hard because of it. And finally, we have the very first of the series, Book 1, The Rising Force. And this is the only book in the series not written by Jude Watson. It's the only one written by Dave Wolverton. And overall, this one was fantastic. I really enjoyed his style of writing. I enjoyed the plot and the locations we visited in the book. But most of all, I really enjoyed the unconventional character writing that was in this book. And what I mean by that is, for example, Obi-Wan is very different than how we see him in the films and the later books. He's got anger issues, and no master wants to take him on as a Padawan, and he's about to be transferred to the Agra Corps, and I really enjoyed that subversion of my expectations. I enjoyed how the book took my expectations and flipped them on their head, and it really gave Jude Watson the room to develop Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan as characters for 20 books going forward. And next we've got Book 2 titled The Dark Rival. And while Book 1 felt more like a prologue to the series, this is where the series truly begins, I think. We've got Jude Watson taking up the mantle, we've got Qui-Gon finally accepting Obi-Wan as his Padawan, and we've also got the introduction of Xanatos as a villain. Though I probably had more fun with the first book, this book was the one that brought all the pieces together and really kicked off the series that we'd come to know going forward. And in second place is Book 5, The Defenders of the Dead. This is the first book in the Melita Dawn storyline, and this storyline is easily the highlight of the entire series for me. From the moment Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan stepped foot on the planet, I was encapsulated in this planet and its generational struggle for peace. This book and the next easily have the best character work in the entire series, with Obi-Wan's personal beliefs coming in conflict with his commitment to the Jedi Order. And finally, the end of this book with Obi-Wan staying behind as Qui-Gon leaves the planet, effectively Obi-Wan leaving the Jedi Order, was such a shocking direction to take this story. And at number 1 is Book 6, The Uncertain Path. Everything I said about Book 5 is true for Book 6 as well. However, what puts this book above the previous one is that the war on Melita Dawn goes from bad to worse in this book. There's death, there's betrayal, there's misunderstanding and miscommunication, there's regret. The war on Melita Dawn was just a pressure cooker, and it was very fun to read in this book. Anyways, that is my list. Thank you all for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And tell me in the comments below, what were your favorite and least favorite books in the Jedi Apprentice series? I'm interested to see what people think. Anyways, stay tuned for my next video where I'll be reading and reviewing Tales from the New Republic. See ya.